stand back there to be on the film? To do the film?
That's a good place to stand.
You're all right.
So thank you for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here. I have not been in this classroom in 4 years, and it is a bittersweet experience since I was instrumental in bringing this classroom about. That's actually not true. I was not instrumental. I was an instrument, but I was not instrumental. As a few words of background about who I am, as if it matters, I had the great good fortune of being conceived in Alberta, Canada, and being born in Bell Gardens, California, which was a town made up of nothing but Okies, Arkies, and Texans who had come out to California in the Grapes of Wrath era and stayed. And we abounded in bars and Pentecostal churches. One on every corner of each type, at least. And some of the greats of country music played in Bell Gardens before they were known as the greats. Johnny Cash played at a notorious place called Leonard's Chit Chat, which was also known by the LA Sheriff's Department as Murder a Month. Just down the street from me, a fellow by the name of Eddie Cochran lived. About 4 houses down, he wrote a song called Summertime Blues. And my brother and I, who were in a country western band, were in his garage on the day that he wrote it. And he later became very famous, tragically was killed in a car accident in London. It was a great place for anyone aspiring to be a writer to grow up in because you had a multitude of accents, most of them, like I say, from Oklahoma, Arkansas, Texas. I actually had a rather thick Oklahoma accent until I was about 16 years old, at which time I ran away from home with the blessings and active encouragement of my parents, who were only too happy to see me go. It was an impossible situation. My dad was 52 when I was born. My dad was born in 1895. He was born in a Russian-Jewish shtetl, which is a little village without running water, without electricity, something right out of Tevye, the Fiddler on the Roof character. Later he went to Canada and became, together with his brother, working for his brother, he was a Russian-Jewish, Yiddish-speaking Canadian cowboy. He was a ranch hand for 20 years on one of my uncle's ranches. And contrary to most impressions one gets from Westerns, all of the ranch hands were Russian-Jewish immigrants. They all spoke Yiddish. When I saw Blazing Saddles, I thought it was a documentary, so one of those things. But my dad came from a totally different culture than I. He had 2 American teenagers on his hands, my brother and myself. We were hellraisers. Everything he did seemed insane to us. Everything we did seemed disrespectful to him. And so it was only a matter of time before I wisely sought higher ground. Higher ground for me was going to Israel. And I wound up on a kibbutz in Israel, went to high school there, fell in love with the lifestyle, fell in love with the country. Knew that I could not pass matriculation exams in Israel, which you need in order to get into university there, because I would have failed miserably in physics, chemistry, trigonometry, and Bible, which you have 12 years of in biblical Hebrew, having lived in Israel for a short amount of time. My conversational Hebrew was just dandy, but my biblical Hebrew left a good deal to be desired, and I knew I would never pass matriculation exams. So I came back to the United States, went to university at UCLA as a film major, at that time thinking of being a director. By a fluke, absolute fluke of chance, if one believes in those things, or providence if one believes in that direction, which I tend to. I sold my first screenplay at the age of 20. Rather, I was hired to write a screenplay at the age of 20 by Universal Studios. And I thought, this is the easiest way to make a living I've ever seen in my life. To heck with directing, I'm going to write. This is a license to steal. I was paid the princely sum of guild scale at that time, which was $1,892.67, which was in 1967, and that made me the richest Jew in L.A. My rent was $50 a month. On the beach in Santa Monica, my tuition at UCLA was $400 a year. I had no intention of paying taxes, so there was no worry there. I drove without insurance, so I didn't have a problem with that, which meant I could live for 2 years on $1,800 and did. After my film career reached an abrupt, I won't say end, because it's now a career that's lasted 40, good Lord, going on 49 years. But it hit a bump in the road. I was under what was called the New Talent Program. Easy Rider had just come out, The Graduate had just come out, and Universal decided that there was money in youth films, and so they hired a kid from UCLA who was 20 years old to write a screenplay. I had never seen a screenplay before in my life, so I didn't know what they looked like, and I had to ask a friend if he could give me one so I at least knew what they looked like, because I hadn't yet taken that class. But they housed us, at that time it was the same year that Universal opened up the tour, and they housed us in a motel that they had bought across the street from the main lot, and we referred to that as the Schlepper Colony, for those of you who may or may not yet know Yiddish. A Schlepper is the downtrodden, and so it wasn't the leper colony, it was the Schlepper Colony. But I was 20 years old, and I had an office, I had a desk, I had a phone, I had an IBM Selectric typewriter. I mean, I was king of the world. I mean, you couldn't get any richer than me. And they gave you all this, these office supplies, typing paper, if you remember, whiteout, carbon paper, because this is before Xerox machines, yellow legal pads, stacks of number 2 pencils. Well, I still had 2 years of college left, and I had a lot of friends who needed those things too. And I thought, well, hell, they're in my office, they belong to me, so I was stupid enough actually to ask the guard, whose name was Scotty. He was a legendary guard at Universal, had been there since the silent film days. I said, Scotty, look at all this neat stuff they give you when they hire you here. Help me load it up into my car. I'm taking it all. And I did. And I called all my friends and said, listen, I can hook you up with some typing paper and legal pads, number 2 pen, whatever you need, man. I got it discount prices right here, you know. That was on a Thursday. On Friday, my phone rang in my office, which was odd because not a lot of people had my office number. The woman on the other end said, please hold for Mr. Wasserman. Lew Wasserman was the president, CEO, founder of MCA Universal, which was Universal Studios. He lived on the 15th floor of Wasserman Towers. So when someone said to me, please hold for Mr. Wasserman, I knew this was a joke, because Lew Wasserman didn't know I was alive. I was in the Schlepper Colony. So I said, put him on. You know, it's obviously one of my friends playing a joke on me. And I pick up the phone, I say, hey, Lew, what's going on? Now, Lew's mother never called him Lew. Lew's mother called him Mr. Wasserman. Everybody, he was one of the most feared figures in all of Hollywood. He was mobbed up, and he was a very feared man. He was a tall, skinny man, but very strong. And he said, Lew, raga, shaga, raga, shaga, shaga, typing paper, raga, shaga, 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 yellow legal pads, raga, shaga, shaga, and he went off on me, and pretty good. So now I was convinced that this was one of my friends whom I had called the night before who was playing a joke on me. And I didn't have time for this because I was writing a screenplay after all. So I said, hey, Lew, and then I bade him a 2-word farewell, which implied that he should perform a physically impossible act, and I hung up. And then the phone rang once again, and the receiver leapt off the cradle and wrapped itself around my neck several times, began choking me. And he said, and proceeded to read me the riot act that I would never work in this town again, and etc. And it suddenly dawned on me that I was talking to Lew Wasserman. And I said, gosh, Mr. Wasserman, I said, honestly, I apologize. I would never have spoken that way to you. I'm a huge fan of yours. I have tremendous respect for you. I thought someone was playing a joke on me, but honestly, you know, if all you've got to worry about on the 15th floor is whether or not I took some typing paper, life must be pretty good. So, you know, because I had $1,875, and I mean, you know, you couldn't intimidate me. And I said, so I'm writing you this great screenplay. I'm going to get back to work. I'm sure you got a busy day. I got a busy day. It's been a ball talking to you. And I'm looking forward to handing in the script. Thanks a lot for calling. And I hung up. Silence. And I go, handled that. You know, that worked. So that was Friday. Monday I came in. My name was off the door. The locks had been changed on my office door. All my stuff was piled up outside the door. And in those days, they parked us in the tour lot. And in '67, you paid when you left the lot. So they had revoked my lot pass, and I actually had to pay to get off the lot. No one returned my phone calls. That's how you knew you were fired in those days. No one actually said you're fired. You simply disappeared, and no one returned your calls. Cut to 20 years later, I'm doing a picture called Gotcha, which was in turnaround from Fox, doing it at Universal, walking out of Frank Price's office, who's on the 14th floor. He was head of productions. Elevator door opens, and out steps Lew Wasserman, whom I have never met, but I did have 2 phone conversations with him. And Frank Price says, oh, Mr. Wasserman, I'd like to introduce Dan Gordon. We're doing a picture of his that's in turnaround from 20th Century Fox. We're very enthused and blah, blah, blah. And I can see Mr. Wasserman looking at me trying to connect the name. And I'm punching that elevator button. I'm like that. And the elevator door opens, and I say, it was a pleasure meeting you, sir. And I just that close to a clean getaway. And he grabbed my arms, and he had one of those bony grips, you know, that a tall, skinny guy has. And he got me between the muscle and the bone. And he really gave it a good press. You know, it hurt quite a bit. Didn't look at me, looked at Frank Price and said, just make sure he doesn't steal the office supplies this time. So that's how great of a man Lew Wasserman was. He was truly a great man. At any rate, so going back, I finished UCLA. I worked for a bit. I did one film that actually, without my knowing, was a money laundering operation for the Genovese family of the mafia. They were looking for the youngest, stupidest kid they could find. They found a kid who all in all knew about Bell Gardens and the Valley of Jezreel in Israel. I'd never been around mob guys in my life. I lived with them for a year. And they had given me $100,000 with which to make the movie, listed the budget as $1 million, and they laundered $900,000. And I had a bodyguard at that time. It was during the Colombo-Gallo War. And I had a bodyguard who was supposed to protect me, but in fact he was there to keep me from running because that's what I wanted to do. And as soon as the opportunity presented itself, I ran. And I ran back to Israel because I wanted guys with guns on my side. Went back to the kibbutz, went into the Israel Defense Forces, was drafted into the Israel Defense Forces in '73 in time for the Yom Kippur War. Lived in Israel for some 11 years, was married there. 2 of my 3 sons were born there, including Zaki, after whom the Zaki Gordon Institute for Independent Filmmaking was named. Finally came back to the United States in the early 80s, and my film career took off, and I've done, this summer, I will be doing my 16th Hollywood feature, which is not bad for a career. 16 features, 200 or 300 hours of television. I was the head writer for a series called Highway to Heaven, which you may remember with Michael Landon. I created a series called Highlander, The Dirty Dozen, a lot of TV work and a good deal of motion picture work. I was enormously blessed to have 3 spectacular sons. The oldest of which, my firstborn, Zachy, was an absolutely remarkable, remarkable, remarkable child. Zachy was gifted with everything but the gift of years. He was a genius. He could light up a room the minute he walked in. He was handsome to the point of movie star handsome. He was brilliant, funny as could be, carried himself like an English lord. There was something absolutely regal about him. When he was 5 years old, I was doing a location scout for a picture that I was going to do in Israel, which eventually fell through. Zachy was born in 76, this was 81. So in 1981, you can imagine a long-distance call from Israel cost a lot of money. You could spend a couple $1,000 pretty easily back then there. So I would call every few days and check in with my then wife and kiss, kiss, hi to the kids, bye-bye. It was like a 45-second call. I'm alive, you're alive, all is good, see you in 3 weeks. And Zachy, my children called me Abba, which is dad in Hebrew. Zachy said, Abba, I made up a movie. I said, that's wonderful. I said, when I get home, I would love to hear about it. He said, no, I have to tell you now. Now, Zachy was a particularly loquacious 5-year-old. He was very talkative. There were no short stories in Zachy's world. I said, actually, sweet boy, you don't need to tell me now. It can wait till I get home. He said, no, I have to tell you now. I said, well, and I never talked to Zachy as if he were a child. He was always a little adult. I said, well, if you can explain to me exactly why it is that you have to tell me now, then you can tell me now. Otherwise, it needs to wait until I get back. He said, I'm 5 years old. I don't know how to write. By the time you get back, I will have forgotten it. And he used that tense, I will have forgotten it. I said, then you better tell me now. And he proceeded over the next 45 minutes to tell me the most beautiful children's story I'd ever heard in my life. When I got back to LA, I called my agent. I said, set a meeting at Amblin, which is Steven Spielberg's company. I said, I've got a movie they're going to buy. I went and pitched it to the woman who was head of development at that time at Amblin. Don't remember her name. She loved it. Came home, and I said, Zachy, Steven Spielberg has a company called Amblin. E.T., Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I said, they want to develop your movie. Whereupon Zachy said, cool. I said, cool indeed. I said, now let me tell you what the notes are. He said, what are notes? I said, notes are the changes that they want to make. He said, if they change it, it won't be my story anymore. I said, sweet boy, you're too young to have to learn this, but I'm going to tell you the cruel truth about the motion picture business. If we make the changes, they'll pay me a lot of money. I'll write the screenplay. They might make the movie. If we don't make the changes, they will not pay me a lot of money. I will not write the screenplay, and they will not make the movie. He said, but if they change it, it's not my movie anymore. I said, I'm going to tell you again. No changes, no money, no screenplay, no movie. That's the way it works. He said, what would you recommend that we do? I said, well, you're 5 years old. I think you have a long career ahead of you. We all eat it on our first script. That's the rule. I recommend that we make the changes. He said, okay, fine, fine. You do that on one of your projects, not mine. I called my agent. I said, please inform Amblin that we have no deal. My partner refuses to make the changes. He said, what partner? What are you talking about? I said, my son. He said, he's 5 years old. I said, it's not my problem. He's 5 years old, but he owns the rights. He said, you got to be kidding me. I said, Jerry, I'm not kidding. I turned to Zaki. I said, when you're older, you and I will write this as a book, and we won't make any changes. And we shelved the project. Cut to, Zaki is now 16. I'm regaling someone with this tale. I don't remember who or what the occasion was. And Zaki pulled me over to the side very respectfully and said, Abba, let me ask you something. Is this actually true, or is this, because you embellish, which is a polite way of saying you're a BSer. I said, no, it's actually true. He said, we had a deal with Steven Spielberg. I said, yeah, we did. He said, and you blew it because of a 5-year-old? Are you out of your mind? So you couldn't win. So Zaki went on to an illustrious academic career. He graduated high school, was the salutatorian of his class, was the founding member of the Phi Beta Kappa Society, was the first exchange student to the then Soviet Union, received a letter from President Reagan congratulating him on that step, was admitted everywhere, literally everywhere, UCLA, USC, the Sorbonne, London Film School, NYU, and Columbia University, which were the best film schools in the world. And chose to go first to Columbia University because they have a classics program the first 2 years, and he wanted to steep himself in the classics. Didn't want to stay at Columbia because at Columbia they don't let you touch a camera till you're in the master's degree program. He wanted to start making movies right away. And his plan was 2 years at Columbia and then transfer into NYU. And he did. And I was always surprised because I didn't know he was my firstborn, so I had never had the experience before. I said, you know, I haven't received any report cards from the university. Well, who do I call there? He said, well, they don't send you the report cards. I said, well, they send me the bills. He said, no, but it's against the law. I said, well, that's the dumbest law I ever heard in my life. And I called the university and I said, there must be some mistake. I need to see what my kids' grades are. I'm paying the bills. And they said, it's against the law. I said, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard of in my life. I said, why don't you send him the bill, you know, instead of me? And they said, well, if he can pay for it, we'll be happy to. So I never saw any report cards. So I would ask Zaki, I would say, how are the grades? And he would say, well, what can I tell you? I would say, you could tell me how the grades are. And he would say, you know, I don't look at grades actually as an indication of what I've achieved in any given class. I said, really? What do you look at grades as being? He said, I look at grades as an indication of my professor's ability to judge wit, intelligence, thinking in an out-of-the-box fashion. Sometimes they disappoint me. What are you going to do? I said, so you're not going to tell me what the grades are? He said, not a chance. All right. He got accepted to NYU, so he hadn't flunked out of Columbia. He finishes up NYU. In the summer that he transitioned from Columbia to NYU, he wrote, co-produced, and directed his first feature film at the age of 20. We wrote the story he had come up with at the age of 5, and it was published by Delacorte in hardback and then later in softback and sold extraordinarily well. So by the age of 20, he was a published author in hardback and had done his first feature film. He never told any of his classmates. Never. None of them had any idea about it. When graduation came around, NYU's graduation is held in Washington Square. It's a zoo. There's thousands of kids. They're all wearing purple gowns. You can't find your kid. And you text or you phone your kid and say, I'll meet you at the drugstore on the corner of this and that. And I'm calling him and texting him, no answer. The kid's got to answer. The graduation ceremony is about to start. No answer. I look in the graduation program because I want to see, there's an expression in Hebrew which is called nachat. In Yiddish it's called nachas. It doesn't exist in English. It means the pride that you take in someone else's accomplishment. And it's that which a parent has a good deal of if they're lucky. So this was a moment of nachat. I want to see my son's name amongst the lists of graduates from an illustrious university, NYU. And it's a long list. There's a lot of people graduating. There are 5,000 kids out there. And I go down, I see Gonzalez, Ginsburg, Giardelli, I don't see any Zachy Gordon there. Damn. And I call him again. He's not answering. And I go, he flunked out. You know, he's been living on my dime in an apartment in Greenwich Village across from the Blue Note, which isn't cheap. And he hasn't showed up because he knows I will kill him. And he's flunked out. And I'm getting really steamed. And I thought, wait a second, calm down. Maybe he graduated cum laude. So I look through the list, which is not an inconsiderable list of names, and I see Gonzalez and Greenberg and Gomez and this, and I don't see Gordon. And I'm going, the little SOB flunked out. I'm going to kill him. I'm telling his brothers, you're about to lose a brother. And they go, ooh, he's mad. I thought maybe I'll look in the smaller column that has magna cum laude, which is impossible, but by now I'm desperate. He's not there. Now I'm going, that's it. That's it. It's over. Ceremony begins, and I am just sitting there absolutely fuming, and I glance down at the 4 names of the students who graduated summa cum laude. And Zachy's was first. And later I asked him, why didn't you tell me? And he said, Abba, it was never hard. It was just nothing to talk about. It was just never difficult. He was a remarkable young man. What I didn't know at that time was that I would have the pleasure of his company for another 6 months only. In December of that year, I was doing a motion picture called The Hurricane. When we had finished shooting in Toronto, we were shooting in New York. And Zachy, when he graduated, I said, why don't you come out to LA? There's no door that I can't open for you. You want to pitch the head of Universal? I've known her since she was somebody's assistant. You want to pitch Spielberg? That's a phone call. That's easy. You're a better writer than I am. You've just graduated from the most illustrious film school in the world. You've got the world by the short end. Come to L.A. He said, that's why I'm going to stay in New York. Because he was determined to make it completely on his own and never mention his father's name. Ever. He was working as a production assistant on a film called Studio 54. It was an HBO film. And equidistant from his office and my office, there was a steakhouse. We would meet there at about midnight. Both of us were putting in long hours. And we would bitch and moan about the idiots we were working with. And I was not so stupid to not realize that life doesn't get any sweeter than that was. To be sitting there with your adult child, and who's the only one of my 3 sons who's gone into the same business as me. And therefore we share a secret language that I don't share with the other boys. And to see what a fine young man he's become. And one evening, which actually turned out to be the last conversation that we ever had of any length, he said, Abba, I made up a film school. And I said, Zachy, English is my first language, and I don't know what that sentence means. He said, well, they teach film the way they did in the, silent picture era when you went to school. He said, they haven't changed since 1969 when you graduated UCLA. He said, and I've come up with a different way of teaching film. And it was revolutionary. He said, the problem with the way they teach film is you start off in your first year, you get all your aesthetic courses. History of the American cinema, history of the European cinema, history of this, history of that, history of the other. All the aesthetics courses. Second year, you'd get all of your beginning craft courses, beginning editing, beginning camera, beginning directing, beginning this, beginning. You begin everything, you finish nothing. Year, you do your first production courses. Maybe you make a 5-minute movie at the end of that year. And finally, in your 4th year, you make a 15-minute to 20-minute thesis film. He said the problem with that is by the time you get to that 4th year, you've forgotten everything you learned in the first year about all those movies you saw. So you're reinventing the wheel. He said there should only be one course. It should be called movies. And the way it should be taught is that on Monday, you watch a classic film that is selected by the instructor who should not be an academic. He or she should be a filmmaker. And that person is going to break down every single scene from the standpoint of screenplay and directing and tell the students the tricks that made that scene work, because there are tricks, there are formulae that make every scene work. He said, just the way you taught me screenwriting, which I did when he was 5 years old. He said, and it'll take about 8 hours to watch the movie that way. You have a group of 20 students, not more. At the end of those 8 hours, this teacher says, okay, you think you understand the formula of this particular scene. Take that formula home and beat for beat, write a 5-minute movie based on that formula. Don't reinvent the wheel. Do it just like a little 5-finger piano exercise. Beat for beat, duplicate the formula of a classic movie with one stricture, that it can't be on the same subject matter. So if you screen The Godfather, it can't be about Italian gangsters. On Tuesday, the students come in. They do pre-production. You pick 5 students out of the 20 to be directors. They're going to each work with 4-man crews. That's 20 kids. They get their locations, their costumes, their actors. And there are 2 people here, at least, Mr. Duvall and my assistant Zach, who I guess has left for a bit, who know about this because they lived through it. You get all your pre-production stuff, locations, logistics, where are the bathrooms, where's the electricity, who's going to supply the water, where's the food. If you're lucky, you get a rehearsal. He said, then you should be able to check out equipment at midnight, which we didn't quite do with the Zaki Institute, but pretty close. And the following day, Wednesday, you have 24 hours in which to shoot your movie. And then on Thursday, you come in with your footage and you show them to your editing instructor. And instead of editing and then getting a grade, you show the footage to the editing instructor who says, okay, you missed a close-up here, you didn't have a master shot here, you crossed the line there, here's how we're going to fix it. And then you do it and get a grade. And when this class is more advanced, the editing instructor says, well, you shot a drama, now we're going to edit a comedy. And then so you do your post-production Thursday and Friday, and then Friday night, you have a film festival of the films that you've shot, and you ask 2 questions. What did you learn, and what would you do differently? Those are the only 2 things that matter. Then Saturday and Sunday, you do seminars, and the seminars are screenwriting, Final Cut Pro, directing actors, directing camera, managing post-production, and guerrilla filmmaking. Literally, how do you make a micro-budget film? And you work the kids 7 days a week, because that's what making a feature is like. You give them absolutely no rest. You work them to the point of total exhaustion. And the ones who drop out are not meant to be filmmakers. And that way, your first semester, every student makes 5 5-minute films the first semester. That is more than an NYU MFA student does in 5 years. And your second semester, all classroom instruction stops, and it goes straight into production. Everybody is making their 20-minute thesis film. And you don't have to worry about instilling a work ethic, because if you foul up and don't report for work on your friend's film where you're supposed to crew, they're going to do the same to you. And the kids will learn very quickly a very strong work ethic. I said, it's brilliant. What are you going to do with it? That's the most revolutionary way of teaching film I've ever heard. What do you intend to do with it? He said, I don't know, I just gave it to you. I said, what am I supposed to do with it? He said, I have no idea. A week later, he ceased to exist on this plane. I have no doubt that there is life after life. I have no doubt that he and the big G pulled the strings on everything that was to follow. Absolutely no doubt. And I had a parent of a child at the school who was either Navajo or Hopi, I don't recall which. And he said, he was very kind to me. He came and he said, I want you to know that this was years later when we founded the school here, that amongst our people, when someone passes over, the connection between you is actually stronger. You actually work together with that person more than you did when they were on this earthly plane. I said, yeah, I know, but I appreciate you saying it. In the beginning, I had thought that I was going to do nothing but establish scholarships in Zaki's name that I would give out at various universities, which I did and do to this day. And the people who have won the Zaki Gordon Awards for excellence in screenwriting at UCLA, USC, Columbia University, Tel Aviv University, I mean, film schools all over the world, have gone on to win Academy Awards. And in their bios, they list Academy Award for this, and I was the honoree of the Zaki Gordon Award for Excellence in Screenwriting at such and such university. At Columbia University, which has the best writing program, I believe, in the world, it is the single most coveted prize, though it isn't the most money. It's interesting. At any rate, so that's what I thought I would do. 6 months after the accident that took Zaki's life, I'm on a plane going to Calgary, to the land of the Yiddish-speaking Russian Jewish cowboys. All the family that I have on my dad's side is all from Western Canada, and I'm going to my cousin's kid's wedding. And I'm sitting next to a woman, and usually I'm very untalkative on planes. I don't like to talk to people. Sometimes I put buds in my ear and just kind of go like this, like I'm listening to music, just so people won't talk to me. But for whatever reason, I was not a curmudgeon. I was sociable. And I said, why are you going to Calgary? She said, well, I want to see their cultural park. I said the same thing I had said to Zaki. I said, English is my first language, but I've never heard the expression, what's a cultural park? She said, well, we have one in Sedona, Arizona. We have an amphitheater, we have elder learning, we have this and that, we have these plans. And there was a building that was going to be an art gallery, but the county ran out of money, and I'm from the local community college. And we went to the community college and said, we want that building for our Sedona campus. And the city fathers said, we'll give you that building on condition that you give us something, because we're Sedona and we have to have exclusivity. We're, you know, Sedona's hot stuff. And therefore, she said, we stupidly said, they said, we need something that doesn't exist at Verde Valley, at Prescott, at any other campus that you have. So she said, we stupidly said we'd give them a film school. She said, the problem is we don't know anything about film schools. We don't know why anybody would want to come to a film school that we'd have. So we're in a pickle. I said, I'll tell you exactly what it's going to be. It's going to be called the Zaki Gordon Institute for Independent Filmmaking. And I proceeded to pitch Zaki's vision to her. She says, this sounds spectacular. Can you be in Sedona in 2 weeks? I said, absolutely. Now, I had been to Sedona numbers of times because I had a ranch in Colorado at one time, and when we drive from LA to Four Corners area, which is where the ranch was, sometimes we'd stop in Sedona. So I had memories of being with Zaki in Sedona, so that was fine. And the president of the college at that time was Doreen Daly, and I went and met with her. This was in 2000. Hard to believe, 16 years ago. And I said, hi, I'm Dan Gordon. I see it means nothing to her. I said, I'm here to talk about the film school. Nobody's briefed her. I said, okay. Let me start from the beginning. My name's Dan Gordon. I'm here to talk about founding the Zaki Gordon Institute for Independent Filmmaking. She said, okay, we'll do it. I said, do you want to know what it is? She said, yeah. So I pitched it to her. She said, sounds great, we'll still do it. Now, I have a deep and abiding and well-founded, I might add, distrust of academia. I am not a fan of academia. They generally screw more things up than they don't. So I said, I'm going to make you a deal. I will finance the opening of this film school. You guys supply the building and the electricity. I'll buy all the equipment. I'll pay the teachers' salaries for 3 years. I intend for there only to be 1 or 2 teachers, so it's not going to be a lot of money. After 3 years, you guys have got to take it over, but I'll get you up and running for 3 years, on condition that you cannot change the curriculum, which is copywritten, without my written approval. 6 months of negotiations ensue, many times at which, and difficult negotiations. Anytime you deal with academia, it's difficult. And I would get up and say, I've had it, I'm out of here, and Doreen would pull me down and say, stop being an idiot, we're going to make this thing work. And but for Doreen Daly, I would have blown it. The school opened. 6 months after we opened and were in business, she said, you know, you're a very odd person. I said, you're not the first to make that observation, but what tipped you off? She said, well, you've never asked me why I so readily agreed to establish the Zaki Gordon Institute for Independent Filmmaking. I said, obviously, you're not in the motion picture business. I said, why would I want to talk you out of the deal? You said yes, that's all I care. The rule in motion picture business is the guy says yes, leave the room. Get out of town before they change their mind. You got a deal. I said, why on earth would I ask you why? She said, oh, okay, I get your point, but don't you think it's curious? I said, well, now that you mention it. So what's the story? So Doreen said that she was raised in Alaska in a family that had a number of challenges. And she said that for a girl like her, the highest thing she could have aspired to was to be a barmaid in Fairbanks. Then people would have said, you go, girl. She said, I wasn't smart enough to get an academic scholarship. I had no athletic skills, so I couldn't get an athletic scholarship. I didn't have enough money to go to college, and I was too poor to qualify for aid to go to college, so college was out. She said, and I had a mentor who paid my way through college and paid all the expenses. And when I graduated, said, you have a good mind, you should get an advanced degree, and paid for my master's degree. And I gather supplemented her all the way through her doctorate. She said, now I'm president of Yavapai College. We have whatever it is, 20-some-odd thousand students, 4 campuses. She said, and everything I have in life I owe to having had this mentor. I said, well, that's a very sweet story, but I don't see the connection between that and the Zaki Gordon Institute for Independent Filmmaking. She said his name was Zach Gordon. Now, if you try to calculate the odds on that journey, you'll go insane. That's tougher to calculate than the Fibonacci equation. So the school ran for 12 years here in Sedona, and it was a tale of brilliance, daring, boldness, creativity. I would always tell the students at the opening day, this is going to be the best year of your life, and universally they said at the end of that year it was the best year of their life, and we turned out wonderful young filmmakers. Doreen got into whatever she got into, and she was no longer at the college, and as it says in the Bible, there arose a Pharaoh who knew not Joseph. And there was a new president of Yavapai College. And I could smell that the minute there were budget cuts, we would be axed. I could just see that the person, well, I won't use the language that I'm thinking, but I am thinking it, was some kind of idiot, if you know what I mean. So I saw that our time here was limited at best. The minute budget cuts happened, we were going to be axed. This was a person who didn't get what we were doing, didn't value what we were doing, and wanted out. And so I began looking around. Plus, Yavapai never had the money to actually fulfill Zaki's vision. Zaki's vision was for a 4-year school. Eventually, they granted an MFA, and it was a much grander vision. So I started looking around for a 4-year university. Public universities, I tried, didn't work. Every time I would get close to a deal with a public university, the teachers' unions would invariably squash it. So I knew it had to be a private university. Private university meant religious university. Notre Dame has a film school, so the Catholics were out. BYU has a film school. Mormons are out. Brandeis University, despite the fact that it's known as a quote-unquote Jewish university, is actually very anti-Israeli. I, to this day, am a soldier and a reserve officer in the Israel Defense Forces, and that ticked me off, and so I said I'm not going to have anything to do with them. So that means it's going to be a Christian university. Got no problem. Remember, I was raised in the land of Pentecostal churches and bars. When I was a kid, I used to play backup in gospel bands at tent shows. So I speak Goyish really well, man. That's like a first language to me. And there are a lot of good stories because I was with some first-rate hustlers who were preachers back then. One in particular, the Reverend Mr. Style, but that's another story. Anyway, so I get along very well with the notion of a Christian university. And I asked a Christian filmmaker friend of mine, did he know of a Christian university that did not have a film school, that might want a film school, and that had deep pockets? And he said, yeah, I think maybe Liberty University. And I said, great. How do I pitch him? He said, I can get a phone meeting with the head of the drama department. So I pitch her. She says, this sounds spectacular. Can you be in Lynchburg in 2 weeks? I said, this sounds oddly familiar. I go to Lynchburg, Virginia. Liberty University was founded by Jerry Falwell Sr. Today it's run by Jerry Falwell Jr., who is not a pastor. He is a businessman and an attorney. And Jerry Sr. was a man of tremendous vision, but he was a terrible businessman. Awful, just terrible. When he died, the university was on the verge of bankruptcy. Jerry Jr. is one of the most decisive leaders I've ever met in any endeavor in my life. He is an extraordinarily impressive man. They now have over $1 billion endowment fund. He took it from bankruptcy. They went into online learning in a very, very big way. They are now second only to University of Phoenix in online learning in the world. So they have deep pockets. I show up. Waiting for me is Jerry Falwell Jr., who's the president. The chancellor was there. The CFO of the university was there. The dean of the School of Communications was there. I pitched for 3 hours. I don't breathe for 3 hours. At the end of 3 hours, I had hoped, the best I could hope for, was they would say, do you have a business plan? I didn't. They'd say, well, you need to write one up. I would. They would say, well, we're nearing the end of our fiscal year, plus you have to submit the business plan and the academic plan. Do you have that written up? I don't. Well, you need to do that. And so you need to submit it. This sounds very interesting. Let's meet again in 6 months when the academic committee has had a chance to review the thing and the business plan has been reviewed, and then we can talk like normal business people about whether or not we're interested in pursuing it any further. I would have broken out the bottle of Cristal on that in a heartbeat. Instead, at the end of the meeting, this was in May 4 years ago, President Falwell said, I have just one question. I said, what's that? He said, can we open the school in September? I said, hell no. I forgot I was at a Christian university. I said, it'll take a year to buy the equipment and install it. This is a massive undertaking. This is going to be 100% digital, and it's going to be state-of-the-art, Jack. It's going to cost you money, or we're not going to get involved. And I can't finance this one. We're talking about big money. He said, come with me. Takes me into another boardroom, and there on the boardroom table, there is an architect's model of a film school. He said, 3 years ago, we decided that we needed a film school. He said, the money's been approved. Yours is better than ours. This is going to be called the Zachy Gordon Cinematic Arts Center. You tell us what equipment to buy, and we'll buy it. I said, Jerry, I'm a BS artist. I actually don't know how to do anything. I said, if you're serious, we need to get Steph Schulze, who is our director of the school in Sedona, out here. He actually knows how to do stuff, and we need to get our IT guy out here, who is a former student. Micah Johnson needs to come out here. He said, good, I want them both here tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning. We're going to hold a convocation and announce to 15,000 students that we're opening the school in September. It's 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I said, Jerry, I live in a town of 12,000 people in northern Arizona. I cannot make travel arrangements at 5 o'clock in the afternoon in Virginia to get anybody here at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. You've got to go through Dulles, take a puddle jumper into Lynchburg. It's just not, it's not possible. He said, oh, sure it is. We'll just send our jet. So I called Steph and I said, Steph, pack your bags. There's a Learjet coming to pick you up. He said, yeah, right. I said, Steph, pack your bags. You're about to become Dean Schulze at twice the salary and in a 4-year university. Jet picks him up the next morning, 10 o'clock. We're in front of 15,000 students, and the opening of the Zaki Gordon Cinematic Arts Center was announced, and we opened the writing program that September. The following year, we opened the film school. We're now in our 3rd year. It is a $60 million facility. It has the finest equipment of any film school on the face of the earth, bar none. Better than SC, better than UCLA, better than NYU and Columbia University by far. They hired Steph, which means we needed to hire a new director here in Sedona. And I saw no reason that the two schools couldn't not only coexist, but actually help one another, because there would be students who we would have an overflow eventually at Liberty who couldn't get into the program at Liberty, who we could direct to Sedona. And we, for those students who wanted to continue into a 4-year program from Sedona, we could refer them to the Zaki program with which they are already familiar in Lynchburg. And there was a young woman who I pushed for her to get hired. She owed me her job. There were people who didn't want to hire her. And I said, no, she'll be good at this. And the first year it worked fairly well. We knew we were facing budget cuts, and they said, we've got to increase enrollment. I hit every high school in Arizona. And the next year, for the first year in the history of the school, we had maximum enrollment, which was 40 students. We couldn't have any more than that. And I came in for my meeting with the director of the program, who owed me her job. And she said, here are the films that you'll be teaching this year. I said, I know what films I'm teaching this year. You don't have to tell me. She said, no, these are the films you'll be teaching this year. I said, excuse me, what? And I saw that she was reshaping the curriculum. I said, I'm going to, full stop. You can't do this. You are an employee of Yavapai College with whom I have a contract, and they are contractually bound to get my written approval, which I have not given, to change the curriculum. So our conversation is over. I'm going to meet with the president of the college. And I went to meet with the president of the college. And she said, well, you have really nothing to say about the curriculum as part of Yavapai College. You're a guest lecturer, and I understand you volunteer your time or something. I said, yes, I do volunteer my time. I said, because you couldn't afford me. I've been offered to be the head of film departments at UCLA, SC, NYU, Columbia, the London Film School, Tel Aviv University, the Jerusalem Film School, Sam Spiegel Film School. Turned them all down. I said, you couldn't afford me for a day, but you get me 2 days a week for free. She said, right, but obviously we are in charge of what gets taught. I said, actually, you're not. I said, are you under the impression that Yavapai College founded this school? She said, well, of course. I said, well, then I have a contract someone should have shown you. She said, well, I wasn't aware of this. I said, well, God will forgive you, and so will I. Now you are. She said, well, this contract gives you entirely too much power. I said, that's because I spent the money to finance the damn school. She said, well, it has to be renegotiated next year, and I'm here to tell you right now that if it's renegotiated, I won't negotiate terms, I will dictate them. I said, are you aware that we have an international reputation? And she said, oh, please. I have a very, very, very bad temper, which I inherited from my Russian, Jewish, Yiddish-speaking cowboy dad. And if she had been a guy, I'd have been over that table in about 2 seconds and would have shown her some really neat stuff that I've learned in 49 years as a soldier. I said, are you aware of the fact that we've had 2 students who were finalists in the Student Academy Awards of the Motion Picture Academy of Arts and Sciences? You know, the ones that give out the Oscars? And it was the first time in the history of the Motion Picture Academy that a school with a total enrollment of, at the time, 32 students had ever beaten out UCLA, SC, NYU, Columbia. And it wasn't once, it was twice. I said, are you aware of the fact that we had a young woman who was 50 years old when she came here? I gave her a couple of years, she was in her 50s, who had never seen a camera, who made a documentary. And that documentary she entered in the Sundance Film Festival. It was not only accepted at Sundance, it won an award at Sundance. And a man came up to her and said, this ought to be a feature. And she said, well, I wouldn't know how to turn it into a feature. I wouldn't have the money. He said, well, I can help out with that. And he became the executive producer. I said, now, are you aware of the fact that that man's name was Robert Redford? I said, we are the only film school in the world that gives scholarships at other film schools. At Columbia University, they honor the name of the Zaki Gordon Institute for Independent Filmmaking in Sedona, and we give them the awards here. We don't give them out in Columbia. We make them come here. And when they come and see what we have, universally they say, I wish I had been here instead of at Columbia or UCLA or USC. And she went, please, honestly. And I went home and I thought, what would Zaki want to do? Because I've got to get my ego out of the way. This is Zaki's school. This isn't mine. In a million years, I could never have engineered the events that led to the founding of this school. Like I say, I was not instrumental. I was an instrument, but I got played by the big G in Zaki. I thought, okay, what do you want to do, kid? I won't tell you what Zaki said, because he used as colorful language as I do. But basically what he said was, if they make the changes, it won't be my story anymore. So I called my attorney, and I said, prepare a cease and desist order. And the next day I tried to get the president of the school on the phone, who was too busy to receive my call. So I got the vice president, and I said, you have 24 hours to remove my son's name from the building. It is licensed to you, and that license is herewith revoked since you're in breach of contract. You have a cease and desist letter that's being messengered to you. And you are to find a new way to teach filmmaking because our curriculum is copyrighted, and I will sue your ass from here to kingdom come for violation of copyright infringement. And then I told the person who I told, you have just cut the soul out of your program. When you do that, the body follows in very short order. I guarantee you by next year at this time, you will not have 12 students. They didn't. And the school, which they had announced with great fanfare as now finally being free of the legacy of Zaki Gordon, was now the Sedona Film School. And it would be a destination film school that people would flock to, and rainbows would fly above it, and unicorns would rejoice, and lions would lie down with the lambs. And people who I had considered my friends, some of them good friends, not a one of them stuck up, not for me, but for the school that was founded here. Everybody thought, we know how to do this. Well, guess what? That school lasted a year and was closed. And I do not mourn its loss. May I tell you that the Zaki Gordon Cinematic Arts Center is now a $60 million facility. It has 125 full-time film majors and 800 students who take classes in the program. It is the only film school on earth which each year produces its own feature-length motion picture, which the school owns. so that we are the only film school on earth that guarantees every single student 2 feature-length IMDb credits before they graduate. There's not another school on earth that can say that. We have the only fully licensed Dolby Surround Sound Lucas THX mixing studio on the East Coast of the United States, not in any university. If Marty Scorsese wants to mix in Dolby Surround Sound Lucas THX, he's got to come to us or he's got to go to LA. That school is the fruition of 12 years of wonderful work that was done here with spectacular students and wonderful teachers. And there was a golden time here. I now look at it as the laboratory that was necessary to work the kinks out of the system so that it could be brought to fruition where it always belonged, which is at Liberty University. And it's doing just fine. Thank you. Thank you. That's very good. Thank you. Because I am a writer, I have a whole bunch of books over there. Most of everything that was said is recounted in a book called Postcards from Heaven, which is exactly that. Details the postcards I have received from people I love in my life from the other side of life. And usually those postcards are not weighty tomes. They simply say, got here just fine, it's really beautiful, till we meet again. There's also my newest book, which is Day of the Dead, which is, if you like a Tom Clancy read, it's a darn good one. Wyatt Earp, which was, for those of you who saw the movie which I wrote that starred Kevin Costner of the same name, my deepest condolences. It was the worst movie ever made. The director absolutely destroyed the screenplay, got me so angry that I wrote the book that was the story that should have been told in the movie. Is one of the most entertaining and well-researched books on Wyatt Earp ever written. What was behind the gunfight at the OK Corral was actually a $20 million land grab that no one has ever written about. It was not about grubby rustlers. It's a good read. There's a wonderful film noir that looks like it'll finally get made this year called Just Play Dead. And a book called The Assignment, which is another Tom Clancy thriller. Be happy to autograph any of them that are over there. They're all good reads, so if you want a good murder mystery, there's one of those. If you want something spiritual, there's one of those. If you want a Tom Clancy one, there's one of those. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them.